Hey guys, what's up? It's Caden with thecodebros.com, and today I'm going to be going over C++ Lesson 1. So to get started, I'm going to take you through a quick PowerPoint. In this, we're going to go over what we'll be covering today. So to start off is our lesson plan for the day. So kind of what we're going to be getting done in this lesson is installing our IDE, which is going to be Visual Studio. There is a free version now. It's called the community version, so it's free to use. We're also going to be learning about some variables as well as displaying some information in the console, so we're going to get into some programming today. So to start off, what is an IDE? Well, an IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. So what an IDE kind of includes typically is going to be a text editor. This text editor will probably have some sort of code formatting for specific languages as well as color coordination. It also will contain a compiler. The compiler is what builds your code into a file that can be run by your machine. In today's lesson, we're going to be using a Windows 32-bit platform, so that compiler will build the code from C++ into an executable file or a .exe that we'll be able to run. The last thing an IDE typically contains is a debugger, and we'll get into debuggers a bit later on in these tutorials, but they're used to debug programs. You'll learn more about that later on. So variables, let's take a quick look at what a variable is. So a variable is a storage location. It's just a location that's going to hold some form of data. What's really cool about variables is the user has a lot of control. So the user gets to control what kind of data is stored into the variables. They get to assign a specific identifier to the variables, so the variable's name, and the variables can store a certain value, whatever the user decides to input into them. So here's a quick example of a variable right here, int age equals 19. So kind of going through this one word at a time, int is the type of data that we're going to store. And int stands for integer, which can be a negative or positive whole number. Next up is the age. That's the identifier I was talking about. So identifiers should be sort of self-documenting, meaning you should name your variables based on its purpose. For example, age is going to describe how old something is. 19 is the value we're storing into it. So I said it had to be a whole number, whether it be positive or negative. So it could take negative 19, it could take 0. Things it can't take is if you try and store something like 5.5, it'll just accept that 5 whole number and ignore the decimal point. So that'll kind of give you a quick idea about some variables and that sort of thing. The next step before we can get started on the actual coding part is going to be installing the IDE. So I'm going to have links in the description to take a look at these. The first link I'll have is the actual download link, so Visual Studio downloads here. You're going to want to grab this Visual Studio Community Edition. It's completely free to use, which is super, super cool. So definitely grab that. The link will be in the description. The next thing is this comparison chart, so you can kind of see the differences between community, professional, and enterprise. The community is free, enterprise and professional do cost money, so we'll start off with community for sure. Definitely grab the free version. And then once you have that, you can download and install it. It's actually a pretty decently long install, so go ahead and pause the video while it installs. But once it is installed and you open your Visual Studio program, this is kind of where you're going to end up. So this is the start page for Visual Studio. Now what we're going to want to do is create a new project. There's two ways to do this. On the start page here, the easiest way is to click this new project button. The alternative way is to go to File, New, and then head over to Project. So when you get to this window, you're going to see something along the lines of this. You're going to want to go to this Install tab and hit Templates and expand that tree down. Then you're going to want to find Visual C++, expand that tree down as well, and head over to the Windows 32 platform. So we're going to be using a Windows 32 console application. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this to C++ lesson 1. Alrighty, and now I already have it at my location. You can go ahead and browse to your location that you'd like to store it. I recommend storing it in some sort of hierarchy just so it's pretty well organized and that sort of thing. But once you have the location set up and it named, you want to make sure this create directory for solution is checked. You don't want to add it to source control, and then you'll just hit OK. It's going to bring up this wizard, so you'll want to hit next. Select this console application button here to make sure that we are working with a console application. You don't want to use the SDL security development lifecycle checks. You don't want to use a precompiled header, and you want to make sure it is an empty project. Then hit finish, and that's going to give us a completely empty project to work with. So you'll get this screen right here. Not much to it yet. But what you're going to want to do is head over to the Solution Explorer. If this doesn't pop up by default, it should. If it doesn't, what you're going to want to do is go to the View tab and hit Solution Explorer right there, and that'll pop it up somewhere, most likely along one of the sides, either the left or right side. Once that Solution Explorer is up, you're going to want to head to the source files. So the source files are where you're going to contain your CPP or C++ files. So just, oops, sorry, I should explain that. Right click, hit add, and then you're going to want to choose new item. So we're going to add a CPP file. I like to call mine main just to match my main function. And that kind of lets me know that's where my main function is contained. We'll talk more about that in a bit. And then it's just as simple as hitting add. So you're going to pop up with this. This is essentially just a blank CPP file, or kind of like a blank text file, just a different extension on the end. So really all you're going to contain here is, words, letters, that sort of thing. But this is where you'll store your code. So the first thing we're going to want to do is, since this project we're working on is going to use output, so we're going to output some content to the screen, you're going to want to include the Iostream header. So what the Iostream header contains is, well, that's the input and output stream. So that's going to let you input into things like variables from the console, from the stream, as well as output to the stream. Now, you're going to also want to use a using statement. You're going to define the scope as the standard namespace. And then we'll use cout. That stands for console output. Then we're also going to want to use, inside of the standard namespace, end-l. So that stands for end line. That's just going to push our console cursor onto the next line for us. Now we're going to want to define int main. So int main, what happens when you compile a C++ program is it calls this main function every time. It looks for int main, and it'll run that. And it'll run whatever's stored inside these brackets. So to start off, we want to put a return 0. You're just always going to end int main with a return 0 until you get later on into programming. If you need something else returned, you can do that. But for our situation, for learning purposes, we're just going to keep that return 0 because we're not actually wanting to return anything specific. So, like every single programmer that decides to make tutorial videos, we're going to go ahead and display Hello World. Hello World, if you've ever tried to learn programming from other sources, is pretty much the go-to first program. So let's get started. We're going to use cout. This is console output again. We're going to use the insertion operators. So we're inserting into the output stream. That's what these two alligators or less than signs mean. That is just an insertion operator overload there. And then we are going to type the string the string hello world. So that's going to display hello world to this console window. And we're going to follow that with an end line. Now there is an alternative to using indel. If you don't like using that, you can also use a \n. That just means go to the next line as well. If I am only using one end line, I prefer using indel. If I need to do like a few before, maybe 3 before, 3 after, this would be my much preferred way to do that. But if I'm just using an end line after whatever I just typed, I like to use the indel personally. Up to you. They don't make too much of a difference. It kind of depends on the compiler. For example, the endl in Visual Studio will actually clear the buffer, whereas \n won't. So there are very minor differences. Now, what is the next step? Well, the next step is going to be using some variables. So variables, you want to define them at the top of your functions when possible. And so what variables we're going to set up today are going to be just some information about yourself, okay? So we're going to want an integer, so a whole number that defines your age. So we'll call that variable my age. We're going to set that equal to 19 to start off with. Next, we're going to make a variable. It's going to be a character, so just one character. And we're going to call it my gender. And you can either set it to male, capital M, or F, capital F, male or female kind of a thing. You could also do lowercase f or lowercase m if you want. I just think the capital looks a bit nicer. And you'll actually want this in a single quote. That just lets it know it's just one character. The double quotes you can put many characters into. Single quotes like this can only contain one. That's kind of the difference there. Next, we're going to actually make a character array. And for those of you who don't quite know what an array is, I went ahead and drew this out in Paint. So we're going to, actually I should probably code this up real quick. So we're going my name for this. I'm going to use 6 characters. You're going to want to use however many characters long your name is plus 1, and I'll explain why there's the plus 1. But to show you an example, my name's Caden. So we got C-A-Y-D-N, that's 5 characters, plus 1 is the 6, and you want to put that in there. So let's go ahead and take a look at what a character array looks like, kind of under the hood, what's going on with the language. So an array is a contiguous block of memory, meaning in your RAM or hard drive or whatever, a contiguous block of memory is memory where the locations are all sequential. So C would be located here, A, Y, D, N, and then after this, hold on, let me drag this down a tad. After this, it would go off into other memory locations that are being used by other programs or something along the lines of that. Most likely it'd be memory that's being used in your program after that. But just to give you an idea of how that is stored in memory. Now this is kind of how we draw out what an array looks like. We use these indexes here. So if I wanted to reference the C character, I could say my name, subscript operator, and put 0 into that. That would put a pointer to this memory location right here. If I was to use this, 2, so something like, and I'll add a text box in here so I can kind of type this out. If I was to do my name, so this is the variable name that we defined up here, sub2, subscript operator. If you hear me say sub something, just kind of assume subscript, especially if it's around brackets and that sort of thing. So what this is going to do is actually push us to the Y location. So that's kind of how you'll reference arrays. We'll cover them more in detail and go over them a bit more in the future. But for now, we are going to go ahead and display this information. Oh, one last thing. All C-string arrays, so if you wanted to store 5 integers, say multiple ages, so say 5, that will actually allow for 5 just like this one, even though you need 6 in here to allow for 5 characters. And the reason being is character arrays in C++ are automatically terminated with a null character. So the last box is going to be automatically filled in with null. So if I made this 5, it would be CAYD, and then the null character would end up being placed right inside this box. So that's why you need that extra character. And that's just so the compiler knows when to stop displaying the string if you call or if you use that string. So we are going to end up displaying that string eventually, but to start off with, actually, yeah, that'll be the first thing we display here. So we're going to go ahead and display a bit more information, but using these variables. So what you want to type is my name is, and then you're going to put my name, and an end L, just to move it down to the next line so it looks nice. Okay? And so what this is going to do is, since my name, it's automatically assumed that it starts at 0. This is what's happening under the hood, is it does do that subscript 0 under the hood. You could start it at 2. That's going to display the Y, D, and N, or in your case, whatever your name is. But when you just put the actual variable name, it automatically does this for you, and it'll display from 0 to the end. Now we're going to see out my gender is, and then we'll put my gender and an end line. And then we'll go ahead and see out I am, oops, sorry. And then we'll put my age, then years old, and another end L, just to make it look nice. So what this is kind of going to look like, and by the way, these are comments, so if you do /* and then // anything you type in here won't actually ever be compiled. So you can type as much as you want in there. The other version is a // This is just for a single line, so now you can type after that line, whereas with /*, anything in between this and this is going to be a comment. So I'm going to kind of give you an idea of what this will look like once we compile this code. So it's going to display hello world on the first line. Then this end line is going to cause pretty much an enter to be pressed. It's going to drop you down to that next line. So now we have my name is, and since we did my name, which currently holds Caden, it's going to display Caden like that, in line to the next line. Then we're going to say my gender is, and we have my gender set to a capital M, so it'll display that capital M, go to the next line, and then it'll say I am, and then my age is 19, and then it has a space years old, exclamation point. So that's essentially the block of text we should see pop up in the console window. So if we go ahead and build our project, what you're going to do is you can either come up here and click Build Solution, or if you want, you can just start without debugging. Now, by default, this will pop up a little box asking you if you'd like to build the solution. What I did was check the little box that said do not show this again. I just assume if I'm running without debugging, I want it to rebuild the solution. So, as you can see, if we, I can Control Z that. If we look at the two outputs, hello world, my name is Caden, my gender is M, I am 19 years old. So that just kind of gives you an idea there of a bit about how outputting to the screen works, how variables work, and that sort of thing. I'm going to try and get some more lessons posted soon. Hope you enjoyed this one. Definitely leave feedback in the comment section if there's something that I went over where you were just super confused or something like that. I definitely like to make sure I touch on those things in the future. This is all very new to me, so I mean, take it easy in the comment section. Don't go too harsh or anything. I'm still learning, but we'll get there. So hope you enjoyed. Definitely check out thecodebros.com for more. We're going to have some JavaScript courses, C++ courses. I also want to do a little bit of soft skills stuff, but more about that in the future to come. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks. Bye.